What if, the only reason a massive tech company survived today is because they essentially burned to the ground or at least came dangerously close to it like a decade ago?
Right. It's a crazy thought.
It is, because usually when you pull up a company's history, you just get the highlight reel, right? You get the big product launches, the ringing of the bell at the stock exchange, these really clean, upward trending charts.
Exactly. You get the polished corporate brochure. It's clean, it's safe, and, it completely ignores the actual struggle it took to get there.
It totally ignores the struggle.
Ah.
But when you asked us to look into the semiconductor equipment industry for you today, and specifically when we went through your notes on Kokusai Electric, ticker 6525, we realized that polished brochure just goes right out the window.
No, absolutely.
We are looking at a corporate DNA that is just forged in absolute fire.
Yeah, it really is the ultimate drama of adaptation.
Welcome to your deep dive on the Japan Stock Podcast. Today, our mission is to dissect Kokusai Electric. They are this Japanese semiconductor equipment giant, and as we went through the research, it just became so clear that you simply cannot understand where they're going without understanding the scars they carry.
Right, and to really set the stage here, Kokusai was founded over 70 years ago. They were eventually spun out of Hitachi. But their real crucible, the thing that shaped who they are today, has been the brutal, highly cyclical nature of the memory chip market.
The booms and the busts.
Exactly. Specifically, the notorious NAND memory market crashes. Because, when demand drops in memory, it doesn't just dip, it drops off a cliff.
Right, capital expenditure just vanishes overnight.
It vanishes, companies go bankrupt, and Kokusai was battle-tested in exactly that environment.
And here's the really fascinating takeaway from those dark times for you listening. The scars of those past market crashes actually became their current armor.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
They learned the hard way that when the market crashes, the only suppliers who survive are the ones the chip makers literally cannot live without. So they developed this relentless, almost obsessive focus on high-margin, utterly indispensable technology.
Right. So if we apply the 80-20 rule to their business today, ignoring the minor subsidiaries and focusing entirely on the core engine, that engine is their equipment and service segments.
Okay, and who are they selling to?
These segments cater directly to manufacturers of NAND memory, DRAM memory, and logic or foundry customers.
Yes.
And if we look at the fiscal year ending March 2026, the revenue split was roughly 60% equipment and 40% services.
And we should probably clarify for you that 40% service number is actually unusually high for fiscal 2026.
Yes, it is.
It's spiked because of this massive wave of what they call upgrade modifications. But honestly, whether it's new equipment or services, the core technology driving their entire profit engine is something called batch ALD.
Right, batch atomic layer deposition. Let me give you the technical reality of this first, just to ground it.
Go for it.
So atomic layer deposition, or ALD, is a process of supplying multiple chemical gases in a cyclical, sequential way to form these ultra-thin films on a silicon wafer. We are talking about building structures at the absolute atomic level.
Which is just incredibly hard to visualize.
It really is.
So let's bring this into the real world. Imagine you are able to paint a house, but the rules say you cannot use a roller. You have to paint it layer by layer, literally atom by atom, so the paint job is perfectly mathematically flat.
Right.
Doing that one house at a time is the standard in the industry. It's called single wafer processing. And it is incredibly precise, but it is so slow.
It is very slow. And the thing is, chips are getting more complex. Modern 3D memory chips are basically microscopic skyscrapers.
Yeah, they go vertical.
Exactly. So if your atomic paint job is even slightly uneven on the bottom floor, the whole top floor collapses.
Yeah.
You need absolute perfection.
Exactly. So single wafer is precise but slow. But Kokusai specialty batch ALD is like taking 100 of those houses, putting them all inside this massive, highly controlled oven, and painting every single house perfectly flat, atom by atom, at the exact same time.
That is a highly accurate visualization of the physics involved, actually. And Kokusai completely dominates this space. They hold a staggering global market share of over 70% in batch ALD.
Wow, over 70%.
Yeah, they have completely mastered the ability to combine that extreme atomic precision with extreme manufacturing volume.
Okay, but this raises an obvious question for me. If it is that incredibly efficient to just paint 100 houses at once, why isn't everyone just doing batch processing?
That's a logical question, right?
Yeah, why build single wafer machines at all? If I'm a competitor, I'm just going to build a bigger oven.
Well, that brings us to the virtual battle in the competitive landscape. Because you have two very distinct strategic paths. Kokusai chose path A,
Which is the batch processing?
right? Extreme, high-volume, high-complexity batch processing, which is perfect for building those massive 3D vertical structures we just talked about. But on the other side, you have the giants of the industry, like Applied Materials, who chose path B.
Okay.
They focus on single wafer speed and precision. Because for different, highly specific layers of a chip, batch processing actually isn't physically ideal. Or, maybe you need to change materials very rapidly, which is hard in a giant batch oven.
Wait, but Applied Materials is the absolute titan of single wafer tech. You're telling me they aren't trying to just crush Kokusai. Why would they leave that massive batch processing money on the table?
And here is the plot twist in the narrative. Applied Materials is actually a major shareholder and a strategic partner of Kokusai Electric.
Oh, wait, really?
Yeah. Terrence Lee, who is a corporate vice president at Applied Materials, has been very clear about this dynamic. They don't view Kokusai as direct competition at all. They view it as filling each other's gaps.
And it's literally collaboration over competition.
Yeah, exactly. When a client semiconductor roadmap requires a single wafer solution for a specific logic layer, Applied steps in. But when the physics of the chip dictate that a massive vertical memory structure needs batch processing,
Kokusai steps in.
Kokusai steps in. They collaborate to provide the complete factory solution that the client actually needs.
I love that. But we can't ignore the elephant in the room here. What about the rising Chinese domestic players?
Right, the geopolitical angle.
Yeah, because you hear so much about companies like Nora aggressively taking over the semiconductor equipment space. Aren't they a massive threat?
They are a very real threat, absolutely. But you have to look at where they are actually attacking. Chinese equipment makers are indeed aggressively taking over older legacy technologies.
Like what?
Specifically, they are dominating older chemical vapor deposition, or CVD tools. CVD is an older, slightly less precise way of depositing chemicals onto chips. It's great for mature nodes.
Yeah.
Think the chips in your microwave or your car.
But here's where it gets really interesting for you as an investor and analyst listening to this. Kokusai's real moat, that armor they forged in the fire, isn't in that old CVD technology at all.
Exactly.
It's in the bleeding edge batch ALD. And right now, based on the market dynamics we're looking at, Chinese domestic makers have absolutely zero presence in that high-end ALD market.
Zero. They literally cannot compete there yet because the physics and the engineering required to build that, what you call the 100-house oven, are just too complex.
So they're completely insulated at the high end.
Precisely. And this bridges us perfectly into their global exposure and those geopolitical friction points. Because China is still a massive part of their story. We have to analyze their geographical revenue shift.
Let's get into the numbers.
So China accounted for 44% of Kokusai's sales in fiscal year 2025. That dropped to 39% in fiscal year 2026, and management is forecasting it to normalize around 34% for the upcoming fiscal year 2027.
Wait, why the sudden drop? Was it a loss of market share?
No, not at all. It was actually the normalization of a massive spike. What drove those huge numbers in 2025 and 2026 were unexpected generational upgrades in Chinese NAND factories.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, because of a well-developed local supply chain and heavy policy support, Chinese memory makers were essentially upgrading their entire fleets all at once.
Yeah.
Kokusai captured that wave. Now, it is just naturally settling back to a sustainable 34%.
Wait, isn't forecasting a smooth, stable 34% reliance on China a bit optimistic given the current situation in the U.S.?
What?
I mean, what about the Trump effect? We are looking at aggressive trade policies, export restrictions on dual-use goods, sudden tariffs. If Washington decides to drop the hammer on tech exports to China, doesn't Kokusai get completely caught in the crossfire?
Yeah, I mean, that is the single biggest geopolitical risk they face. It's the big if.
Yeah.
But we really need to look at Kokusai's structural defense mechanisms here.
Okay, what kind of defense?
First, their direct U.S. revenue is tiny. It hovers right around 3%. So a direct U.S. tariff on their goods hitting U.S. soil barely scratches their top line.
Right.
But more importantly, let's look at how they actually ship their products to China or anywhere else. Almost all of their export contracts transfer ownership at the shipping port or the airport. This is a crucial term called free on board, or FOB.
Okay, let's break that down because I think that's a brilliant aha moment for this deep dive. Free on board means that the second Kokusai's billion-yen machine is loaded onto a cargo ship in Tokyo or a plane at Narita, it legally belongs to the buyer.
Exactly. So if that machine arrives at a foreign port and gets slapped with a sudden 25% import tariff, Kokusai does not bear the direct financial cost. The buyer does. Kokusai's revenue was officially locked in the moment the machine left Japanese soil.
Okay, that definitely shields them from the tariff itself. But what if the disruption isn't just a tariff? What if it's a severe physical supply chain shock?
Like a logistical nightmare.
Right. Let's simulate a what-if scenario. What if there is a prolonged blockade in the Strait of Hormuz or, an escalation in the South China Sea that completely halts the physical movement of the raw materials they need to build these massive machines?
This is where their management team demonstrated some serious operational foresight. Simulating that exact type of severe supply chain shock, Kokusai proactively altered its inventory accounting rules in early fiscal year 2026.
Really? How so?
They moved away from a strict time since arrival evaluation.
Which means, under the old rules, if a highly specialized, really expensive part sat on a warehouse shelf for a year without being used, the accountants basically forced the company to write down its value.
Right.
It looked like a financial loss on the books, even if the part was perfectly good and ready to be used.
Exactly. It was a penalty for holding inventory. So management changed their accounting to historical usage evaluations. And they did this specifically so they could aggressively stockpile critical materials and survive long supply chain lead times.
Without taking a hit.
Right. Without taking artificial, crushing financial hits to their stated profits, they essentially built a legal financial bunker to pad their physical inventory for survival.
That is incredibly smart. I mean, it is adaptation in real time. But what about the currency sensitivity? The yen has been on an absolute wild ride against the US dollar. Does a fluctuating exchange rate wipe out their margins?
They are remarkably insulated there, too. Because their export sales are overwhelmingly yen-denominated, their revenue and their cost structure are actually matched.
Oh, that's clever.
Yeah, therefore, their pre-tax profits don't swing wildly with those US-Japan exchange rate shocks. They've built structural financial shock absorbers across the board.
So we talked about the tech, the competition, and all this geopolitical armor. Let's look at the actual engine room, specifically the latest May 2026 data, because this is where we have to explicitly link all these operational variables we just discussed directly to their earnings per share and their return on equity.
Right, let's get into the hard numbers.
Yeah, what are the hard numbers?
So the newly released forecasts for fiscal year 2027, which were just published in May 2026, show revenue is projected to jump an impressive 19% to 280 billion yen.
Let me stop you there because 19% can sound kind of abstract if you're just looking at a spreadsheet. Let's visualize that number. In real terms, they are adding roughly 45 billion yen in brand new sales.
Which is huge.
To put that in perspective, that is like taking an entirely new mid-sized tech company and just bolting it onto their balance sheet in just 12 months. That is staggering physical growth.
It is massive. But here's the logic you really need to pay attention to. Their profit margin expansion. Their profits are actually growing significantly faster than their revenue. Adjusted operating profit is expected to jump 27%.
Wait, why, if revenue is up 19, why is profit up 27?
It all comes down to the product mix. They are selling much more of their highest value technology, specifically their mini-batch ALD systems and what they call their Mora treatment tools.
Okay, let's define that. Mora tools aren't just putting layers on, right? They are film treatment tools.
Correct.
They use microwaves to alter the properties of the film after it's deposited, which reduces electrical resistance and makes the chip perform better. It's incredibly high-end, specialized tech.
Exactly. And those high-value tools will hit 71% of their total equipment sales in fiscal year 2027. Because those machines command such a premium, it is pushing their overall gross margins up to 42%.
42%, wow.
Right. And when your gross margins are that high, every extra yen of revenue drops straight to the bottom line, which heavily drives up your earnings per share.
And there's a structural accounting change for fiscal 2027 that we really need to highlight for you because it changes how you read their reports.
Yeah, it's a segment shift.
Yeah. Management is actively moving upgrades and 200mm legacy tools out of the service segment and moving them into the equipment segment. Why? Because upgrading these massive machines today is so complex and so expensive that it is essentially the same economic driver as buying new wafer fab equipment. It reflects the true reality of the market.
That's right. So when you look at their future earnings reports, their service revenue will suddenly look smaller. You have to know that is an accounting shift to reflect market trends, not a sudden loss of business.
Which brings us to the ultimate truth serum for any corporate strategy, the cash.
Always follow the cash.
Always. We have to look at their capital allocation. Are they hoarding all this new profit from those 42% margins, or are they sharing it?
We definitely have to critically evaluate management's choices here between reinvestment and shareholder reward. And the data shows that now that they are net cash positive, management has officially committed to returning roughly 70% of their free cash flow to shareholders.
70%.
Yeah, they are doing this via dividends and stock buybacks. For fiscal year 2027, they announced a 47 yen per share dividend, which represents a 25.6% payout ratio.
Okay, but I have to push back on this a little bit. Is this genuinely a shareholder-first mindset, or is it just checking the boxes to keep institutional investors quiet? You see it all the time. Companies starve their own future R&D budgets just to pay a flashy dividend today, and then they lose their competitive edge 3 years down the line.
It is a vital question to ask. But the operational data actually suggests they are genuinely balancing it. They are not starving their future at all.
How do we know?
Well, for fiscal year 2027, alongside that dividend, they are actively increasing human resources spending by over 3 billion yen. They are increasing research and development by 2 billion yen and digital transformation by 1 billion yen.
And crucially, all of this is happening while they are ramping up a massive new physical production facility in Toyama, a facility that will literally double their manufacturing capacity for these giant ovens. So they are investing heavily in physical growth while still paying out today.
Exactly. And returning that cash via buybacks shrinks the equity base, which is exactly how they are driving up their return on equity alongside their earnings per share. The causal chain is very clean here.
Okay, so the armor is strong, the margins are expanding, they survived the memory crashes, and they are returning cash to shareholders. It sounds almost too perfectly engineered. As the lead analyst looking at this, what is your professional skepticism? What is the blind spot we are missing in this May 2026 data?
Professional prudence requires us to step back from just reading the highlights, right? And there's a critical blind spot here, and it's buried in the timing of their revenue. The blind spot is their heavy reliance on delayed Chinese DRAM memory orders.
Okay, explain that.
Management actually admitted that some significant Chinese DRAM investments were pushed from late fiscal year 2026 into this new fiscal year 2027 forecast.
So that massive 280 billion yen revenue projection has a buffer of delayed orders baked right into it.
Exactly. The risk is this. If those domestic Chinese players delay their orders again, whether due to internal macroeconomic pressures in China or maybe expanded U.S. tech embargoes that disrupt their building plans, that built-in fiscal year 2027 revenue buffer could simply evaporate.
Wow.
And if those orders don't materialize, Kokusai misses their targets.
I agree completely. And if you look outside of the memory market for a safety net, the picture isn't great. The mature node logic and foundry market recovery is still looking incredibly vague and sluggish globally.
Very sluggish.
That means Kokusai is highly dependent on the memory cycle holding strong. If the memory market stumbles or if those Chinese DRAM orders vanish, they do not have a strong mature node logic safety net to fall back on right now.
Which brings us full circle, really. Their fortunes are still tied to the extreme cyclicality of memory, even with their incredible batch ALD mode. The fire that forged them is still the biggest threat to them.
So as you process all of this research for your own portfolio, here's a parting question we want you to mull over. As the geopolitical tech wall between the United States and China grows taller and taller, can a company whose entire economic moat relies on highly complex physical hardware innovation survive the next 3 years without being forced to explicitly choose a side?
That's the real question. If we connect everything we've discussed to that bigger picture, it becomes clear that this drama of adaptation is far from over.
Thank you for joining this deep dive on the Japan Stock Podcast. Remember, true market insight isn't just found in the clean numbers on a spreadsheet or a polished corporate brochure. It is found in understanding the physical atoms being manipulated, the incredibly complex machines painting 100 houses at once, and the massive global geopolitical forces bearing down on the entire supply chain. Keep questioning the narrative and always look for the scars.